had on the whole timing of things. I had a bunch of stuff written out, but I was off on some hours when I made the guesstimation of when this was going to play in Australia versus here. I just got done training dogs for 8 hours, so all my notes that I written down, they're all at home. But we can start off with throwing a little background on myself. I got 20 years working in the jails. I'm been canine now for the last 8. Been working with dogs that long, and then having dogs my whole life. And I'm a certifying official for 2 different bodies out here in the United States, California Narcotics Canine Association, and the Police Officer Standardizing Training, POST, which is what a lot of our law enforcement goes by. Those are the 2 governing bodies that we run in. So if there's anybody has any questions out there they want to start with, we can go there. Or I can just start rattling off a bunch of stuff that we do.
Tex, are you online? Because you're bound to have questions. Nope, just rattle away, Chris.
All right. So pretty much dogs in a correctional setting. One of the biggest things that we start with, and I'm pretty much going to cover some of the things that we handle in our handlers course that we share with our new handlers and things that they have to pretty much relearn in a custody setting. So once you get a dog, you've been in a custody setting for a little while. You've been working, the line for a while. So you kind of become accustomed to, things you got to do in your day-to-day process. One of the biggest things that handlers have to learn is how to redo their job while working with a dog. Out here in California, and a lot of the jails within the United States, and I'm sure you guys do it the same way, our dogs go everywhere we go. If I got to go do a security check, if I got to go check on something, my dog goes with me. And in our jails, our dogs are single-purpose dogs. We had dual-purpose dogs for a little while. We had a new admin come in. They did away with that. So now we're strictly single-purpose dogs. So there are times when the dog becomes an anchor. And those are the things that you have to learn. Those are the things that you have to learn as being a new handler, is where to work your dog, when to work your dog. Is my dog always working? Where does my dog go? If an emergency happens, so say your partner's in a fight, or inmates start fighting right in front of you or down the hall or in another housing unit, how do I got to go deal with, is my dog an asset or is he an anchor? And you got to have that contingency plan while you have your dog with you and while you're working. So that's one of the first things that our handlers have to learn, is how to walk through there with their dog. Blind corners, working through doors, or walking through doors. How do doors open? The smallest things that we take for granted in our daily job is something that we have to learn how to redo with our dogs. Does the door swing forward? Does the door slide? Is it a slider door or is it a swing door? What's on the other side? Am I walking into a hazard? Having your head on a swivel, even more than just yourself, because now you have a dog that is going to react if something happens, and things like that. So you have to be cautious of, yourself and your dog. Um, but one of the bigger things is having the confidence and the um, willingness to work your dogs in, dangerous is a big word, but when all the inmates are out and about and they're doing their life, you know, they're doing what they do on the inside, that is the danger zone. I am very much positive on working my dog through a cell block while the inmates are still, the day room's open, they're out doing their thing, trying to, you know, catch them in the act. They know we come here in California. We do hourly cell checks. Pretty sure you guys do those there as well. And they know we're coming. But if we show up at random times with a dog that has bionic smelling ability, you're bound to find somebody doing something wrong. And that's when I call it the danger zone, because you're walking into an unpredictable situation, because they don't know you're coming. They don't know you're doing an off-hour check or a you know, just a curious walkthrough kind of thing, or even targeting a couple cells or living spaces while these guys are out and about. They're not in jail because they're the smartest people in the world, and they're easy to be. What's the word I'm looking for? I apologize. I've been in the sun all day. They're easy to be. They're predictable. When they don't think you're coming, that's when they're going to do something wrong, and you can stumble upon it. You can get in there and you can get a good find out of it, you know, create a good case. Is there anybody got any questions on that? Any, you know, things you want to throw in there? Nope. All right. Let's see. So the next, I saw a question pop up on the screen, but I missed it.
Oh shit. Hey Chris, can you hear me?
I can.
Hey Chris, it's Dan and Luke here. We're just dialing in on the same phone. We're both at work right now.
All right.
I just had a quick question. So, we're primarily a response team here in Victoria in Melbourne, and we run multi-purpose dogs, right? So, trained in offender work and narcotics. We
Okay.
We primarily just respond, right? So we work a lot of queues, and we often find ourselves doing a security role before clearing a unit, before conducting like targeted cell searches, for example. I often find, in particular with my little Mally, that at times it's pretty difficult to kind of distinguish coming out of like hunting or bite drive or bite gear, and then being able to go into, you know, a fresh cell that's stinking of human odor and focusing on getting that dog into the drive to find, you know, 2 strips of bupe or whatever's possibly there. So I was just wondering if you got any advice in terms of, you know, you said you've run multi-purpose dogs over there, but now they're single purpose, you know, what you would really focus on being able to set those 2 clear differences. Like, we use like a little basic drug harness to cue the dog, but, you know, I noticed for mine, that's not enough to have him go, okay, cool, now it's time to search.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things that we do is, if the dog's in, you know, protection mode, or you know, going out clearing a unit, looking for the man basically, and we take the dog out, and we have on a blank on the word regiments that we start So as you know, you go in and do your search with your dog, then take them out of that for a couple minutes, let them, you know, kind of cool out for a minute. And then what we do is we'll pull out a tug and we'll play tug with the dog and we'll get him in a happy mood. And then we'll go in and then we'll start looking for dope. But it's not like simultaneous. It's not like, okay, go look for the man. And then a second later, flip them over and go look for dope. We give them a couple minutes to decompress. And then we pull out our tug and we play with a regimen of, to go look for dope, we make it happy and fun. So we pull out a tug, and that's kind of how we cue them up a little bit. All of our dogs wear all the same equipment with no matter what job they do. It's how we prep them and what we're going to go do, right? So you go get your dog to look for the man. Your dog, you're pumped. Your dog's going to be pumped. But then if you put them away for a minute, turn the page, kind of relax a little bit, come up to the car in a fun mode, or come up to the kennel or wherever they're at, you know, in a fun, playful mode, pull out your tug. Hey, we're going to go look for dope, play them up. And that's usually how we can separate the two. And then we train, the clarity comes in and it gets built kind of in that way, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, definitely. It just sounds like a lot of that comes into your preparation of what you're doing, right? And this might seem like a stupid question. It might seem like a stupid question, right? But would you go as far as having your specific toys or articles for drug work, and then, you know, like for example, my dog's got mad Kong drive. Would I keep that focus for narcotics work and then save the tug and stuff for the man work? I guess it's all part of the queue, isn't it? I guess.
Right, and that's not a dumb question. We have a lot of guys that do that. So like the tug, you know, a lot of guys when they work their bite work and stuff, the dog is coming, you know, in the beginning stages, the dog's coming off the man, coming back into a tug. But when it's dope, the dog's coming into a ball on a rope, or a Kong ball, or a Kong on a rope, or a Kong in general. And so yeah, there's a separation there. And I mean, having a single purpose dog, anything my dog can put in his mouth and bite on and play tug with me and interact with me he's happy with. But there are certain correlations between like a tug and bite work and then a ball and dope work. And that's one of the things where, you know, you just got to test the waters with it and see if that's something your dog buys, or maybe the dog's drive is just super high and you can use anything. But the biggest thing is the preparation into whatever exercise you're going to go and do is how you approach that. That would be the biggest thing for me, to get the dog to go from man into dope. Because it's not going to happen one and the same within seconds, like I was saying.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's cool. That's pretty clear.
Sweet. Any other questions there?
Yeah, could I ask a question? Although I think the last answer might have answered part of my question. When you talked about single or dual purpose or multi-purpose dogs, I was going to ask what your dogs are looking for. Is it just, say, drugs, or is it, you know, other sorts of contraband perhaps? But I think it's partly answered by the multi-purpose involving security work. Is that the way is that what you meant by dual purpose or single purpose dogs?
Yes. So when I meant dual purpose is on one side of the table, my dog looks for the man.
Yeah. And
then the other side of the table is contraband.
Okay, cool. That answers my question. Thank you.
All right, no problem.
That was easy.
If they all were that easy. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Yeah, Chris,
yeah,
I got
mate,
a question. You go first, bud.
Yeah, I got a question in regards to searching incoming prisoner mail. Do you lay the mail out individually in a straight line or scattered, or do you allow the dog to search in like a tub or a box full of, or you might call it a crate, I'm not sure, full of mail, and then based on indication of that large crate, would you then spread it out?
So I've done it a couple different ways. I do it with spreading it out in a straight line, or like, you know, down the base of a wall kind of thing, kind of laying it out like tile. I've done the tubs. I think it boils down to, with me, is how much mail do I have to search at that time, and what is my time frame. I've had better success with laying it out versus putting it in stacks and then putting it in, you know, in tubs or whatever. Just because laying it out like tile, it kind of gives them an easier scent picture versus the pile of mail, and then I got to go lay it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Thanks, Ben.
No problem. And on the thing with mail, have you guys had any issues with fentanyl?
No, not yet. Our main ones are the main drugs or buprenorphine and bupe strips. I'm not sure if you have them in America, like a little thin wafer they put under their tongue, but that's our main drug. It's probably more so than heroin, cocaine, ice. Bupe is our number one drug.
Oh wow, yeah. No, we don't have that out here yet. We still got the wackos making the black tar and the crystal meth.
I think we're a bit more desperate in Australia. We give them the buprenorphine strips as a substitute for narcotics, for them to obviously to come down off the drugs, and we give them this in prison, but they also can get a script for it on the outside and have their partners or friends or whatever posted in the mail, and it's actually can be hidden very well.
Okay. I think we've had some guys, I think you're using something of that nature. And we've had a couple guys kind of try to mail it in, but our snitches kind of told us about it, so that's how we caught it that way. But I think we've had one or two guys that are using it's a strip to basically bring them off of opiates, right?
Yes, orange strip.
Yeah. We've had very, very minimal cases with those being used. But like, we don't even give out pretty much medication that's qualified for narcotics pretty much anymore. But
So, Chris, the buprenorphine is Australia's new version of methadone. So we moved them away from methadone and onto this buprenorphine.
okay, yeah, methadone is popular here. Okay.
So, Chris, I had a question.
Yes.
Of course, you guys are basically detecting minute odors compared to like a police canine or something. Like, you guys are working on near nothing of odor. So
Yeah.
when you're imprinting one of your dogs, do you start on a mass odor and then slowly bring that odor down, or do you instantly start on a small amount?
When we do our imprinting, we start out with a pretty good amount, and then it decreases fairly fast. We use the larger odor to suck them in, and then once they understand the game, we start shrinking that odor big time, to where it's almost like, you know, the match head of Wattman paper that's marinated in the source.
And then once you've got your dog and you're starting to do scenario work or proof your dog, are you still using the minute odor sizes, or do you go back to large amounts to get them used to the picture again?
No, we will not really to the very large end of the scale. We pretty much fluctuate from the small to the medium. That way because in our world, it's like you said, it's very minute odor. So a lot of our work is very small odor, and a small portion of the work is medium to large odor. But as we're doing the scenario, like starting off with putting them in new environments and stuff like that, we're toward the medium to the low.
Cool. Thanks for that.
No problem.
Chris, it's Dan here again.
What's up?
Hey, mate. Just a quick question on when you're doing your imprinting and your like odor introductions. Have you done much with pseudo narcotics, or do you guys generally just get licenses and permissions for the real stuff and just work from that? So, well, I guess the question is, do you use pseudos or not? You use the real gear.
So what we use is ScentLogix as our pseudo, if you will. And from there, we imprint them with that, and then we transition into the real odor. And then as their maintenance training and training progresses, we go back and forth so that they have the understanding of all of the components versus additional whatever they cut it with kind of stuff, whatever was added to that dope through the time, so they understand and have a clearer picture.
Nice. Cool.
And then with the ScentLogix, not that I'm pumping their product or anything, but I've had zero issues going from ScentLogix to real, and then into a certification at the end of our handler course.
Yeah, got it. So just keep a healthy mix between the two, pretty much, right?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
David would love you for that comment, Chris.
Right? He would. Yeah.
So over here, I use a product called Socks. I think you guys have got it in the States as well.
Okay.
So it's real odor infused into little tubes of the different narcotics. And you can cut those tubes down with a knife to make the scent lower and lower and lower. So far, most dogs hit on real, but as you said, like I mix it up a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mixing it up. I try to give the dogs every aspect of a scent picture that they can get, because one guy makes his dope different than another guy, and so on down the line and stuff like that, to where having something that has all the components in it, it gives them the full body, if you will. And then finding something that has one or two components out of those 5 or 6, whatever flavor it might be, it gives them, to me, it gives them an edge, in my personal opinion.
So, Chris, when you actually do, say for instance, you've locked the prison down for a day and you're going to do cell-to-cell searching, do you have a standard operating procedure on the way that you're going to search that cell, or is it just you can read by the body language and the setup of the cell that, okay, I'm going to run my dog in this direction first?
No, it's pretty much, so all of our cells are pretty much identical. Through most of our housing units, we have, one of our jails is an older jail, and it's had the additions through the years, so some of the cell blocks look different than the other ones. But I predominantly start on the bunk area and then work my dog out and around, and then have him come back into the cell. But as far as like a protocol for once it's been down for a minute and then we're going to go into it, I like to empty the whole place out and house the inmates somewhere else for at least a half an hour. And then 10 or 15 minutes after they're gone, I let everything settle for as much as we can with, a building where you can't really turn the AC off or the heater off or anything of that nature. And then I'll go in and systematically run down the tier and then I'm not a fan of targets. So if they tell me, you know, oh, this cell's hot, I like to just run through and not know what my target is. That way I can't show any kind of influence over my dog or cue them or, you know, come in with that mindset that it's got to be in here, and then I talk them into something that's wrong. But as far as systematically searching a cell, I like to start at the bunk area and then work away from it.
And that does cause a big issue sometimes when the officer, and even in a patrol, knows something that they influence the dog in their behavior. Do you find that as well with some of your handlers?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's, it's a huge, I don't want to say it's a huge fault, but it pretty much is, lack of better words. Because, you know, we influence our dogs when we have a certain mindset going on, you know, and it goes back to the question that Luke was asking earlier between bite work and dope work. You know, it's, you go up, you show up and you're influencing your dog. You're pumped, your dog's going to get pumped. You're relaxed, your dog's going to be relaxed. If your dog's searching a cell and they tell you, hey, in cell 104, I know there's dope in there and it's got to be at the foot of his bed. Well, the minute that dog gets into that area, you start changing your body language, and then your dog starts reading you. And then if that continues on a normal basis, now you've created a dog that has the handler in the equation. And that is really all bad in a situation where you have so many distracting odors in your environment that the dog might show a lot of interest to a cup that's sitting on the other side of the room, but now because he had a change of behavior on that cup, now you're going to show influence and change your behavior to talk him into something that's wrong. Yeah, that can go really downhill really fast.
So, sorry, it sounds like I'm asking all the questions, so I do apologize.
I appreciate you asking questions. Like I said, I messed up on the time frame. My notes are at home.
I've got a question in regards to, obviously you're going to a unit. What are the numbers of cells you as an individual handler would be searching? Say, on average, we might have 30 cells on one wing in a unit. And I know you said you don't like to know or understand your target, so that would mean that you're possibly doing the whole unit in one search. Would that be correct?
Yes. Yeah. So to answer that portion is, so duration or stamina, if you will, is something that I train into my dog. Is that way we can hit, like I think the most we have in our unit, in any of one of our big units, is 20 cells. And those are 2-man cells between our two facilities. And anything over that, I give them a break. So if they want me to search 2 housing units, I'll take a break in the middle. If I am working through that and I notice that halfway through or a quarter way through, my dog starts to really get tired because he's working really, really hard, or it's hot, or the temperature, I'll give him a break and then go back in where I stopped. And there's times where we go in and it's 1 cell that we go and search. So having a variation, stamina is pretty much the key in that whole situation.
Now that gives me a good understanding. Now, if you have those 20 cells and it's an operational search, what's your breakdown if you do training with those 20 cells? Would you do 7 or 8 operational searches and then give your dog a find? And this is obviously can vary from a green dog to a very experienced dog, because obviously an experienced dog could possibly go in and do the 20 cells without a find. But how would you break down that or differentiate that from a green dog to an experienced dog? Have you got something set that you guys like to do?
Yeah, so with a green dog, we'll go in and do probably 2 or 3 cells. And and then have a hide set up close to the area that we're working in. So like maybe in the day room or something like that, to where the dog will end on a positive and then take a break, and then we'll come back. And mind you, that's in a training scenario. That's not like I go and empty a cell block with 7 guys in, or 7 cells or 10 cells in it, and I give them a break after 3 unless it's needed. So to answer your question, in an operational setting is I'll have him work until I recognize, okay, you're starting to fail. And then I'll have somebody set something in one of those cells that we've already cleared. Not real dope. We'll use like Wattman paper or something like that. And then that way I can take him into that cell, and have him search it, and he has an operational find, but it's actually a training find. Does it make sense?
Yes.
All right, good. I didn't confuse you. I confused myself there for a second. Sorry. But now with a green dog, I would start out with smaller searches that I can break down. So if I have 10 cells, I'm going to break that down to probably 3 or 4 cells, and then I'll have a known find, not in those cells that we haven't searched, or not in those cells, but in the proximity of like the day room, like I was saying, and then give them a break, and then bring them back in and search the other half.
Very good. What breed of dogs are you using for your narcotics?
So we have Malinois, Shepherds, and I broke the long time pointy-eared dog mold with a black lab. So that's my partner. I have a 6-year-old black lab, and we have another lab that just graduated their handler course probably 3 or 4 months ago. But it was predominantly pointy-eared dogs, and now we're going to floppy-eared dogs, or we're bringing them in slowly.
Yeah, well, how do you find it having a male or a shepherd not being able to bite?
What's that?
How do you find it having a male or a shepherd trained purely for drugs and not having the bite aspect in the dog?
Believe it or not, my blood pressure went down. Being able to now work a dog that is not trained to bite anything is actually relaxing. If that doesn't sound funny. So having him now in a jail setting, I can actually go in, and the day room and all the inmates, they're out and about, they're moving around, doing their thing. I can actually go in and walk around the inmates and search with my dog, and not have to worry that if somebody makes the wrong motion or reaches for something or raises their hand, that he's going to stop and think that this guy's trying to get me. But believe me, there's times where I'd love to have a dual purpose dog in there, put the dog in it down and take care of it, and, do what I got to do. And I love that aspect of having a 4-legged backup partner. I loved it. But now having a floppy-eared dog where I don't have to worry about him biting anything, it brings a different type of enjoyment to it.
No, that makes sense. Now, how much of that would the prisoners are aware that these dogs don't bite, and is that the reason for the continuation of the use of the male and the shepherd, for obviously the unknown for the prisoners that this dog could potentially bite you? Because obviously there is other breeds that, like, such as a spaniel with phenomenal, searching capabilities, and like personally, I could see, and I would love to have a spaniel to do the drug component of our searching, and
definitely
completely separate it from my bite dog, because the drives are just completely different.
Oh, definitely. So one of the things that I've done is I've taught my dog how to bark on command. So I don't tell anybody that he doesn't bite. I don't tell staff that he doesn't bite. They know that he doesn't do protection work, but they don't know that he doesn't bite. So if I need to get somebody's attention, stuff like that, I can give him his bark command, and he sounds like a Rottweiler behind a door barking. But they don't know, at least I like to think they don't know, but that, and there's times he's seen him, he barks at inmates through the windows and when he's in control units and stuff like that. So they're not 100% sure, as far as I know, that he doesn't bite, but I haven't had anybody test it. And the times that I've used him, you know, you get that inmate in the cell, hey, I'm not coming out, screw you. And they go, we're going to get the dog. So they'll call me and I'll stand 3 feet away from the door and I'll get him into a bark and it'll echo into that cell. And next thing you know, this guy comes flying out of the cell. Okay, I'll come out. I give up. So it's kind of, I haven't said it to anybody that he doesn't bite.
No, that makes sense, complete sense. Like, hang on, I think Dan's got a question.
Yeah, Chris, I was just curious when you phased out the multi-purpose dogs with your line of work. When did they phase out and you go to single purpose?
So that was, let's see, probably around 2016 is when we got our new admin and they took away the protection part of it. My first dog, we actually went, I was a second handler, so I got him and they said, okay, you're single purpose. That lasted about 8 months. They made us dual purpose, which he was already dual purpose. I was a second handler. He was a street dog. So he already had patrol certification on him and stuff like that. And then 8 months into that run, they made us dual purpose for probably, I don't know, about a year or two. And then we had new admin and they cut it off. So it was kind of up and down, but the liability of it is why they went away from it. Because we're in California, there's a lot of liability worrying.
Yeah, I can get that. That makes sense.
Chris, you mentioned you walk your dogs into the day room and around through the inmates and that. So are you actually training some type of mass screening technique with the detection dogs or no?
No. And the reason that we're not is our admin is not, California is really not on board with screen sniffing. And our facility, our admin, we're not really, most of the departments in our area, we can't sniff the people. Even with a barrier, they're afraid of liability and things like that. But one of the things that we have kind of involved or started to use is air scenting. So if I'm standing, you know, against the wall somewhere in a hallway and I got inmates walking past me, or I'm in a day room and a guy walks past me and my dog's head perks up and he shows interest in that inmate and he starts to pursue him, then I'll stop that guy and be like, tell my partner, hey, grab that dude. We got to take him down and strip him out. My dog just had, you know, interest in him. And we've had success with the air scenting. We've had dudes that have had dope in their shirt pocket as they tried to go to court. They tried to hide it under some paper. And then we had another inmate. We had word that he was carrying marijuana in his person. And I set my dog up in the hallway. He walked past and basically my dog air scented him all the way into our processing area. And when he realized the dog was following him, he produced probably a good Cadbury egg worth of marijuana out of his rectum. So that's pretty much how we're dealing with the air scenting, sniffing of people kind of thing, being in and about them. Is pretty much, that's how we're doing. We're not really doing any screen stuff.
So kind of like a vaporweight type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So as they move around, the riffs that they let off, they become airborne, and the dog, picks it up just like a vapor wake. Exactly.
So in your common areas and your cells, I know how they got constant air conditioning or heating going on. Do you
Oh, yeah.
actually think, or do you, I suppose you would have, or how did you do it? Look at how the wind flows through those buildings, what type of wind turbulence it's creating.
Yeah. So, I'm pretty much the nerd of our unit, if you will. Um, I like to know how the air moves in my facility. So a couple ways that I've done it. I've waited until nighttime when everybody's locked down, and I will go and place a hide in, an area where an inmate might put it. And I'll leave it there. Knowing it's there, I'll leave it there for 3 or 4 hours. And then I'll start my dog at the main gate or the door to the cell, to the common area, and allow him, with all the inmates locked down, allow him to free search on a long line. And just figuring out, watching him, where odor's pooling, how it's moving, what direction did he need to go to get to that hide. And because, most of our cell blocks are identical, I can take that same theory and put out a different hide in a different location on a different day room, and let it rest for the same amount of time, and then have him rerun that area. And and that's one of the ways that I did it. The other one was like using a lighter. So if you go to a doorway and you put it at the seam, you start, get the lighter going, and if that flame is moving, it'll tell you which way the air is pushing. Or you can use baby powder or something like that. There's even a thing called the dragon smoker, and it puts out a constant fog, and it's non-toxic. You can't hurt the inmates or anything like that with it, and it'll tell you which way the air is moving. If it's sucking in under a door, if it's pushing out over the tier, and those are the different ways that I've gone out and figured out how the air and the odor is moving inside my environments that I'm searching. And one of the other things is, so in the cells, and I don't know if you guys have it as well, but there's an the air's blowing in, and then there's a return where it's sucking out the air. Some of our cells, the return is high on the wall. So when the air is blowing in on one side and then it's spinning around the room and getting sucked up, that could have an effect on how your odor works, how where the hide's at, how is it playing in the room. Couple of ours they're low, to where the return sucks it right to the back of the cell, up underneath the desk next to the toilet. And then above that on the same wall is the intake, where the air is blowing into the cell. So you have, this turbine kind of thing if the inmates plug their door underneath with a towel or some kind of obstruction, right? Because they're afraid that they're going to get ants and mice in their cell. So they'll stop the airflow from coming out of their cell. So when you're walking through during a lockdown and you're trying to hit seams, that pretty much, they'll clog that up. So they'll just keep that air in their room. But when you open up that seam at the bottom of the door, or the food port isn't very tight, that air is getting pushed right out. So if there is odor in that room, it's escaping into the tier where you're walking by with your dog. Those are just some of the things that I've found while working in the jails that I have in the different facilities with dogs, to where how can I get that upper hand? Anybody else got any other questions?
So does your canine unit work closely with your intel unit so that you guys have intel before searches on certain places things are being hidden or certain increases in certain wings that should need to be looked at?
Yes. So we have an open communication with them. So if I come back from my days off, I can go talk to some of the guys like the gang unit, and then criminal intel unit, things like that. And I can go, hey, what's going on? And oh, this cell block has had this and this, that, and the other thing. So yeah, we have communication between that. And then like we have random calls that'll come in to the supervisors where family is concerned that, their son is talking about, or boyfriend or whatever is talking about drugs in the tank. And then that person will call the front desk and we'll get information that way to where it won't even go through our intel guy. It'll just come to us through a supervisor. So we have different avenues to gain information throughout where we go. And then you have officers that they have pretty good gift of gab. Always interesting. They have a gift of gab, so they'll go out and they'll gain information and then come back and fill us in on the canine team or whatever dog team's working that day or if they're on their shift and stuff like that. A lot of our stuff though, a lot of our searches are blind. We have drugs in our facilities, but we don't have, we're not a prison, so we don't have that big of numbers of custody. But a lot of the stuff we do, believe it or not, our numbers of not finding anything are much higher than our numbers of finding stuff.
Just got a question in regards to annual trials or assessments of a canine handler. Obviously, yourself being a canine handler, what testing are you put through as far as, do you have unknown searches that you're unaware of set by someone else who's separate from your unit or your supervisor? How does that all work with your assessments as a canine handler, as an individual?
So our certifications, we do them yearly, and they're set up by certifying officials that are part of the governing body that we're certifying under. So they're blind to us. They're not blind to the certifying official, but they'll give us, X amount of rooms, and then X amount of hides will be within that search requirement that they give us. And then on top of that, we got to do vehicles. And usually it's, 4 vehicles with an unknown amount of hides that are out there, blind to us, but the certifying official knows. And then in our post or a certification, because the police officer standardizing training is one that we use. And then we also use California Narcotics Canine Association. So the post one, they have the same exercises, but they add an area search. So you have to have, an outside area with, I think it's 1,500 square feet. And you have to have, there's a hide out there somewhere, and the dog has to be able to work that size of an area to locate the odor that's out there. But that's pretty much what the certifications contain.
How often do you need to do your cert? Is it once, twice a year?
Once a year for each body. So we'll overlap, like 3 or 4 months will overlap. So we're never out of a certification. So if you miss, if we do one in January and then we do the next governing body in March, as long as you do those two within the year that you have built with them, you're never out of certification. So that's how we do it.
Have you had any indications or experiences that you've been challenged through the courts?
Have not yet.
What about in your department? Is there obviously it sounds very official with the governing body with your testing. So far, touch wood, we haven't had any challenges through the court system with any of our indications so far. So we as from a legal aspect, there is no governing body with our testing, or we have trials and things like that, but it's not official, so to speak. So I was just curious to understand if your department or in the state of California, you guys have been challenged through the courts where you've indicated on something or someone, and that's been obviously questioned by lawyers.
Not as of yet. We haven't. Some departments have, not ours. And being that I'm a certifying official for the California Narcotics Canine Association and Post in the Northern California region, I haven't been called to court on anything yet. So it's very seldom that it has happened. That the courts have challenged any indications that we've had.
Thanks, mate. That gives me a fair idea.
Chris, can I just ask about, you mentioned that you have, you do quite a lot of searches where the dogs don't find anything.
Yeah.
So what sort of things do you do when you say exit the search? Is there something you do if the dog hasn't found anything, you just leave the room, do normal stuff, or do you reward it, or, you know, how do you handle that so that the dog maintains, I suppose, enthusiasm for the job?
So what I'll do is like a lot of our searches are blank, or not blank, but we don't find anything. So what I'll do is if I go and do a search in cell block A and I don't find anything, then I'll go to another cell block and I'll set up a search where I put out a hide. Say the guy's at court and I know nobody's in his cell. So I'll take out, I'll take the material that I've marinated in the odor, hide it in that cell, work him to that cell, and he'll go in and he'll have a positive find in that cell. I put it there because I've already searched that cell because that guy's not in there and I know it's blank. So I put it in there, and then he gets a positive in a different search in a different housing unit. So
Okay.
having, what's that?
Great. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, and one of the big, with not finding very much, yes, energy kind of goes down. So pretty much every other day, if not once a day, I'll set up a positive search in an area on, in our facilities where he'll be positive on a find, and he always walks away a winner.
Perfect.
If we don't find anything, I don't pay for that because I want him to understand that odor equals reward. And if he doesn't find the odor, he doesn't get paid.
Great. Thanks for that. Very clear.
No problem.
Hey, Chris, it's Dan here again. Just a quick question.
Yep.
Do you guys train and like facilitate around praise offs and not paying the dog there and then, and training that operational ability to be able to praise your dog off and work on? Do you guys focus on that, or do you stick with the method of, it's not often you get that indication, and when the dog does it, the dog gets paid, and you manage that situation accordingly to, the situation? What do you guys do with that setup?
So we do praise offs in an operational setting because when he finds something, yes, I want to trust him 100%, but I don't know exactly what he found. So once I find it, or once he finds it, I'll take him out. I'll praise him. Yeah, good boy. And I'll get him out of there, get him all excited, a bunch of touching and hugging. And then I'll go in and physically figure out what he found and then walk away from that. And one of the ways that we build up into that is I had that right in my head and it just went away. Drawing a complete blank on what I was going to say. I apologize. Variables is during our training, we pay with variables. So we can get an operational mode where if I go up and he does something good, he finds it, does his thing, and I come up with a praise off, that falls into his variable. So if I know that while he's working, he is, 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, which means he can go 1, 2, or 3 hides, praise off, before I have to give him his tug or his ball to reinforce his actions. I know that I can get at least one operational find, praise him away, good boy, and then later on that day, I'll go out and set up a thing, and we'll make it a positive where I'll use the variable system and then pay him and walk out. And that's how we get away with using that.
Yeah, nice. And have you ever kind of seen like a negative impact down the track of incorporating that element of, or essentially, you're praising them off to come away from what we're trying to promote is don't leave it. It's yours. You found it.
So one of the things that we use markers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he finds the hide and he's there and I say good, right? Or yes, or whatever word that, everybody uses. And then he comes away from it. That's his marker to where, okay, I can leave that now. I'm released, and now I'll praise him. Good boy, and then we'll walk out. Never had any issues with that by using the marker. He doesn't feel like, it doesn't dampen him by thinking he's getting ripped off the odor or pulled away from it or a negative reinforcement kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting one. Like, it's something I've always questioned, right? Since we've incorporated the yes marker, is obviously like you start doing praise offs, we're not marking it with that same marker word. We're bridging and saying good boy, praising them up to move them on and work on. So that's where, I guess that question's come up, right? Should you really be incorporating, okay, dog's indicated, you're going to mark it, but you're paying it with praise. You're not paying it with a high value item. And then the dog knows, okay, cool, I can work on from that point. So is that where you think I'm getting it confused, where you should be marking it and taking the risk, but paying him with something less valuable and moving on, as opposed to not marking it and bridging it and saying, good boy, and giving him a pat?
Right. And that's where, in an operational setting, you do that once or twice, you're not going to harm anything. If that becomes your normal, then you're depleting your value of your reinforcement. But if you do it once or twice, and then you go over to a training setting and you throw it out there, and then you reinforce it with that ball, you just rebuilt what just happened. Make sense?
Yeah, got it. That's cool. Thanks.
No problem. Anybody else?
Chris, I got how do you pick your canine handlers? Do you bring them in for an interview and see how much dog experience they got, or how do you do that?
So that's a good question. We just actually had a canine test on Wednesday. So starts off with letter of interest, and at that point they share, kind of like a resume of what they've done to show their interest. So I have an idea of what we're getting, knocking on the door. And then the first thing we do is a physical agility, basically a PT test, where they have to run a certain course, it's 3/4 of a mile, and it's in a canyon setting around a range that's out in our foothills. And during that, they have to simulate shoulder carrying a 75 to 80 pound sandbag. I think it's 25 feet. And then they go off and do a little bit of a run through like a rabbit trail. And then they come back. Then they have a certain amount of push-ups they have to do. And then they have to be able to chest carry the same bag to simulate lifting up your dog, and carrying it back to where it was, another 25 feet, and then run through another side of the canyon. And that's pass or fail. That's like a 10-minute evolution. So if they pass that, then they go into an oral board where they'll have the unit sergeant, pretty much, let's see, the unit sergeant, it's a lieutenant that's on the panel, and then either the trainer or a senior handler that's on the panel. And then they get panel questions from them. And then I think it's a writing exercise where they're given a scenario that happened with their dog, and they have to write out the outcome of that scenario, what happened, what took place, and to test, kind of see where they're at with a little bit of knowledge. And we don't expect our handlers to come in with a great deal of knowledge of being a handler. But we do like them to have a history of dogs in their life, and some sort of an understanding of a dog, how they're going to act, how to integrate them with your family, how to integrate them if you have another dog at home, how to integrate them if you have cats, and then what kind of stuff have they done with dogs, like a history kind of thing. But and then they do a personnel file review, and then it becomes a team assessment. And that's where, even if you pass all those steps, if the team feels that you're going to bring some bad light to the team or something like that, and it's a team vote, you might not make it. But those are the steps that we take on new handlers.
And then who marries up the dog with that handler? Is that the team picks a dog that's sitting in the kennels to be pulled out, or do they go in and see if they bond with the dog?
Yeah, so what'll happen is the handler will go with the head trainer and the sergeant, and they'll go out and test some dogs and see which one comes around that's the best chemistry and that has all the boxes checked, and then go from there. And that's how they get married up.
Cool, thanks for that. I suppose another good question would be, what are the pitfalls that you find being a canine handler in a corrections environment?
Let's see, the pitfalls. It's a 24-hour job.
You mentioned earlier sometimes they can be a ball and chain.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest ones, is at times the dog is an anchor at the time. At sometimes, like, if one of the biggest things is if you have to respond to, an emergency call, a fight, whether it's inmate on inmate, staff, inmate, whatever it is, being that he's a single purpose dog, he's an anchor at that point. I got to find some place to ditch him so I can go to this issue and help out and put hands on somebody if I need to. That's the biggest pitfall of it in the big deal. One of the things that they wanted, and I had to explain to them that it's not a good thing, is they just wanted the dog walked around everywhere, like everywhere. And there's certain places that, a single purpose dog doesn't need to hang out. Like a dorm setting. If you're in a desk that's not secure, and there's contact that can be made between the inmates and you got to go in there and out of there, and you got to respond to stuff that happens in there. Having a dog in that situation, not the best, because yeah, he might stay in it down at the podium, but what's to say that something doesn't catch his nose and he follows his nose to odor and being obedient to odor. Or you get the inmates right in front of you that start to fight because they think you're going to save them, right? And you got your dog with you. Now one hand is out of play because you're holding your dog back, and the other one, you're calling for cover and you're either engaging or you're backing out. So that's pretty much the biggest pitfalls. Outside of that, I really don't find any because I really love working a dog and training them and being a part of the dog world.
Being a certifier, what's the biggest issues you find handlers make during their certification? Is it them panicking and that feeding down the lead to the dog?
The biggest thing that I find is not the panicking is part of it. The other part is over involvement so being that handler that has to drive the search, right? Because a dog's nose, 300 billion olfactory receptors in their face, and we have like 500,000, 50,000, whatever it is. And the handler comes in and they're kind of, freaked out. Oh, it's a certification. I'm getting wigged out over it. So instead of letting the dog work and allowing the dog to do the search, they go in and try to over control it. That ends up cueing the dog and talking the dog into basically non-productive alerts, and false alerts. That's usually the biggest thing that I see is that.
Yeah, because I heard a really good podcast between you and Cameron Ford, where I think they tried to stuff you up with a heap of cars that had no odor at all.
Yeah, that was my introduction to Cameron Ford. Yeah, so, and that's where that's what really opened my eyes to, being able to talk your dog into something that's not there, both mentally and physically. So, and I'll tell a story real quick for the ones that didn't hear the podcast. I'm at a dog conference in Reno. Cameron Ford is one of the instructors there. And we show up, and it's a hands-on gig. And we show up in this parking lot, and there's, I think it's 9 cars out there. They're all different makes and models, but they're all white city cars. They're all parked evenly spaced in, 3 rows of 3 or whatever it was. And he goes, okay, here's your search, clear this parking lot, call your alerts nice and loud, and go from there. Okay, so I go in. Well, A, we're at training. B, he said call my alerts. He's got to be telling me that there's odor out there. So we're at training, there's got to be odor. So I went in with the mindset that there's odor in there. And I walked out after the first car, called my alert, he said no. I was like, huh, all right. So then we move on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 alerts, all of them ending with no. I get to the last car. It is a white Ford Ranger with a diamond-plated toolbox on the back. And the reason I understand that and I remember that isn't because Cameron gave me PTSD during a search. It was because I sniffed, or my dog sniffed, about every half inch of that car, that truck. Top, bottom, bed of the truck, diamond plate, everything. And at that point, I gave up. I said, you know what, dog? You go do you. I'm just going to stand here and hold the leash, and I'm going to be that guy on the other end of the line that just watches you do your thing. And he searched the car like a champion. At a couple minutes into searching that car, I said, dude, we're done. And he proceeded to tell me that, good, because there's no odor in that search. He never walked out into those cars. He never opened his dope box. And because I went in with the mindset that there's odor in there, as well as 75% of the other handlers that did the exercise, I talked my dog into numerous false alerts, right? So that got me thinking, what am I doing that's wrong and making my dog fall, throw out all these weird alerts? What am I doing wrong? So I sat back, videotaped a bunch of my searches, and realized that I am over involved. So I befriended Cameron that day. We hung out, and I got his phone number from him, and I told him, I said, dude, I'm gonna beat you up on the phone, like calling you every day, asking you all these questions. So I went back, videotaped my stuff, watched a bunch of my videos of me working my dog. And I was raised in the old school era where, check, the old school Charlie Brown kind of W thing on the wall and working the car seams and stuff like that. And that's what I knew. He taught me the psychology behind it is, what is your mindset? And if you go in thinking, you're going to come out and it's going to be wrong the large majority of the time. So now that's how I've been able to be successful in a custody setting, with having my large majority of searches having 0 fines, my smaller amount of searches, or the small percentage of my searches, coming out positive. From the smallest of flakes, I'm talking like a booger of heroin, to I think the biggest we had was 9 grams of weed inside a ball of chewing tobacco. But yeah, it's mindset. And that's one of the biggest things that I learned from that exercise that I did in front of Cameron. And I've also turned that around. I teach nose work, scent detection dogs for sport. And in some of my seminars that I've done, I've actually used little kind of like butter containers, little square kind of things made, put out 25 of them. They're all identical. And I've had people do the same thing. They throw out X amount of false alerts because they felt there was odor out there. Well, if you go in with the mindset that, man, there's nothing out there, my dog will tell me when it's out there. Success will come.
I've got a question, mate, in regards to obviously specifically marijuana in the States and how it's become legalized in many of the US states. Have you guys had to undo that odor that's been instilled into the dog, or how's that come about?
Not yet.
It's still contraband, obviously, in jails. Or is there
Right.
a planning process to undo the odor, or are you going to have to scrap that dog altogether and start from fresh?
So the good thing is, right now it's still federally illegal. So because it's still federally illegal, we still have that leg to stand on, because when the dog smells the car, right, or the bag or whatever outside of custody, yes, in custody it's still a felony flat. But if the dog smells something on the streets, dog's not telling us that it's, oh, hey, yeah, buddy, I'm smelling marijuana, or yeah, buddy, I'm smelling heroin. He's trained for 4 odors, and you get in. The bad thing is most of our dope charges have gone from felonies to misdemeanors. So unless it's a task force or interdiction, things like that, dope's really not hunted that big anymore. Or parole or probation searches or stuff like that. But to answer your question is, no, we're not scrapping the dog yet because it's still federally illegal. But what we're doing now is the new dogs that come in, unless they're going to have a task where marijuana is part of it, we don't put marijuana on the dogs no more.
No, that's very, very interesting. I think we're a long way off that in Australia, but yeah, I'm curious to know because I won't mention the base odor that we put into a lot of our narcotic dogs, but I was just curious to know if odors that are like pretty much put into the dog's brain from day dot, is there a way of undoing that or removing an odor, or is it something you really have to start from fresh?
No. There's really no way to detrain it. It's in there. I have asked that question, and that was the answer that I've gotten from some of the other trainers that I've talked to. It's in there. And when it, if the feds deem it legal at one point, then we might have to scrap our dogs. But they're not yet, but we're not adding the marijuana to them just so we don't have to scrap any in the future. And then we got jail dogs and stuff that have the marijuana on them, that are trained on marijuana. So if there's a need on the street, we can call a jail dog can be called out. If, say they're raiding a house or whatever, or doing packaging and stuff like that, where they're trying to send marijuana through the mail kind of thing. But no, we're just not putting it on them anymore unless the department requests it.
Oh, thanks for that.
All right. Again, I apologize. I don't have my notes with me. Let's see. We talked about the new stuff, talked about some training. Questions were killer.
Yeah, I think if no one else has got any questions, I think that was awesome, and we might wrap it up here.
Sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate you guys asking me to come out and do this. Had a good time.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. This is my first, obviously, webinar, so I'm keen to keep learning, and obviously it makes it much easier for us being at work, or we find it hard to get external training, and so this is something that we can do on our own accord. So yeah.
This is the first webinar that I've done as well.
Wayne, I'm also interested to be involved in any future webinars, or obviously as a participant, but yeah, it's really opened things up for me, and I'm keen to learn and continue to learn.
Yeah, anytime, let me know.
Yeah, when we first contacted Chris was like, never done one, but I'll give it a go. He's done really well. Thanks heaps, Chris. That was awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for contacting me, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed the podcast, and I hope you guys had a good time here. I had a blast.
Thank you. I thought it was great. And look, I just really do it for a bit of fun with my dog, there's finding scent. But all the stuff you talked about was pretty relevant to what we do, so except the drug part. So thanks a lot. It was great.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Well, if anyone doesn't have any more questions, I'd like to thank Chris, thank everyone for coming, and I think we'll wrap it up here.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys. See ya. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'll be in contact.